Hey guys, what's up? Looks like we finally made it. Here we are at part 2 of episode 4, Riese. I know you guys have been anxiously waiting it, and we finally made it here. It looks like the giant has risen, and we're going to have to clean up the mess. But first, let's take an assessment of what's going on around us. Wow, we're here, and it looks like we're at Group 935's facility. But who exactly is Group 935? What's their deal? What's going on with them? And something I didn't mention in part 1, but Group 935 was an actual group made up of mainly German scientists, and they were working on wonder weapons during the war. So obviously that's the basis for this Group 935. And the leader, of course, Dr. Maxis, is the one in charge, and we know that from the radios that we hear in this stage, one of which is him talking to new recruits for Group 935, talking about how now they have pledged their allegiance to the group. There is no family, there are no friends, no country, only Group 935. That's it, just us, nobody else. No communication with the outside world, and he's obviously very adamant about his commitment to the group. We can even hear that in one of the radio messages where he's talking about Sophia and how he's actually thinking about sending her away because she's a distraction to him. So he's obviously very gung-ho. This is his life's work, if you will. And yeah, so we got Group 935 here. We know the main people, at least everyone we know so far, is Dr. Maxis, who's the leader, his assistant, Edward Richtofin, who's one of our 4 characters, and we have Sophia, who is attracted to and attracted by Dr. Maxis. We have Peter McCain, the one who grows crazy at Verrucht, Harvey Yenna, the guy who makes the Hyena Infrared, and very possibly the pack-a-punched version of the DG2, which we're going to talk about later on in this video, and Porter. Porter, of course, made the Porter's X2 ray gun, which is the pack-a-punched version. Ooh, a doggy. Pack-a-punched version of the regular ray gun, which is made by Dr. Maxis. Now, obviously, there's a ton more scientists than that working in Group 935. Because, I mean, just look at this one facility by itself. There's no way, 6 people could run it. And then on top of that, they have Verrucht and Shinonuma. So we know that they have a lot of different scientists working on all of these different projects. These are just the main ones that we know about, the ones whose names we know. And so they're here, not all of them, but most of these guys and the rest of the scientists are all here at Riese working on different projects, and one of which is the teleporter, which they created and as of yet is unable to transmit living tissue. And so we hear on the radio them doing tests with the teleporter, and people, when they're sent through, are either turned into zombies or black goo and mush at the mainframe. And then they're also doing animal testing, which we know from one of the radio messages. We hear how Fluffy is created, and Fluffy's sent through the teleporter but doesn't reappear as a black mess. So Richtofin thinks that's at least somewhat of a success, obviously, because we know that Fluffy didn't completely die, but then something's weird because Fluffy does reappear, just not near the mainframe. So we sort of see how the teleporter, being powered by element 115, doesn't work well with living tissue. Something always goes wrong, unless of course you're immune to the element 115, like our 4 characters are, which brings us to the next test they were working on. Which is human test subjects working on mind control. And they were working on mind control in 2 senses. Dr. Maxis believed that they would be able to use living subjects and figure out how to use mind control much easier than by using the dead ones. Which is funny because Richtofin is the one who thinks that they must be able to control the undead somehow. And yet, Maxis is the one working on the control over the undead, and Richtofin is the one who's working on the control over living test subjects. And it looks like it actually is a success in both senses, because they're immune to element 115, our 3 characters, as well as a Mexican that gets killed here at some point, and his spleen is removed, which we know from the Call of the Dead radios. But these guys are immune to element 115, so they over-bombard them with radiation or inject them with extra 115 or something. Somehow Richtofin ups the dosage, so to speak, and as a result of that, they lose their memory. But it seems like we keep following Richtofin around and doing what he says to do, mainly because we have no memory of anything beforehand, and we know if we don't follow him, we're never going to figure it out. So it's more of like a forced following, a forced mind control, as opposed to him actually controlling our minds. He has control over us because we don't remember anything and we need him. And then also Maxis is able to figure out a way to control the zombies through Sam, because Sam has some sort of telekinetic power, and we know that the zombies are being controlled by her even before she is dead or before she disappears or transforms. The reason why we know too that it's definitely her controlling them, or definitely someone controlling them, her demonic side, is because we have a radio message in here too where Maxis is doing a test on the zombies, and they seem to be pretty docile creatures. I mean, they startle easily, and they obviously can kill a man pretty easily, but they'll just stand there and hang out, and they'll even walk if you ask them to walk, to step forward. But any slight noise and they'll freak out, and that doesn't seem like these zombies, because these zombies are freaking out right from the start. They're chasing after you from the very moment you set foot in the level. So something must be driving them, and that of course is Sam. The zombies wouldn't act this way if it wasn't for her will being imposed on them. And then some other tests they were doing here as well is obviously they created the ray gun, and Richtofin creates the monkey bomb and the DG2, which is then tested at Verrückt and Shinonuma. And they make the pack-punch machine, the mystery box, and all that stuff, the electrical defenses, the traps and whatnot. And the interesting thing about the monkey bomb is we hear in a radio message Maxis talk about it and how it screams when it's put in the fire. And this message, he's distrusting. He's talking about his distrust of Richtofin. So we know that there's this strange divide between them. And then we also know that the monkey screaming, he mentions that maybe it's just the element 115 messing with his head. And who else have we seen that with but Peter? So Peter, his head was being messed with at Verrückt by Sam. So we can see that Sam's sort of working her magic on Maxis as well. And Richtofin, probably, because he always talks about the voices and hearing stuff in his head. And so it would seem that his immunity to element 115 allows him to have some grasp on reality, but she's still like toying with his head and saying things to him and you know, just messing around. So what happens next, after they're doing all these tests and stuff, at this point in time, the war has ended, and the Illuminati knows that both the Americans and the Russians are going to be coming in, and they want to make sure that all of these tests and everything that they have Richtofin spying on, they're going to be able to keep hold of the information. So they send him a message saying it's time to kill Maxis, and of course Richtofin's all psyched about that because he's pissed off about the DG2 not being mass-produced. The interesting thing about that is, though, in a radio message in here, we hear Maxis say that he's willing to you know, mass-produce it, but the Reichstag group, who is funding them, is pulling the funding. So Richtofin's actually kind of pissed off at Maxis for no reason. However, the Illuminati would have still sent the message. There's a note written in Illuminati in the grates in the ground over here in the spawn, and it tells him that it's time to kill Maxis. So they do a test on Fluffy, and Fluffy disappears and then reappears, but is demonic, is a zombified dog. And he sees this as the moment to kill Maxis and not have it look like murder. And he actually lucks out because Sam runs in at the exact same time, and he's able to take care of both people he doesn't like all at once. So everything kind of just lines up just right for Richtofin. And so he sets that in motion, and as he's leaving, he grabs his 3 compatriots that are all immune to the element 115, jumps in the teleporter and runs off to Shinonuma to grab his DG2 and bring it back here. But he thought that Maxis and Sam would be dead, and what actually happens is when they take the teleporter, like I said, the teleporter changes living tissue, either by making it a zombie, or turning the dog into hellhounds, or just killing the thing, or in Sam's case, transforming her, and she's now part of some sort of sub-dimension where she's able to control the zombies, almost like the Board, where she is the zombies. The zombies are her, and she's the mind, so she's a single entity that's controlling all of these beings, just like the Board from Star Trek. So that just happened, and now we've run off. And all the other scientists that are left are freaking out. One guy hangs himself. Another guy takes a cyanide pill, which we hear in a radio message. We see some guy in one of the coolant stacks. I guess he jumped in and froze to death rather than being eaten alive. And then after we run off and we get the DG2, we gotta jump in the teleporters and head back here for the next part in Richtofin's master plan. And that is, of course, to come back here because this is where the Pack-a-Punch machine is. And so he needs to get here and Pack-a-Punch the DG2 because he needs it powered up for some reason. He needs to use it for something. And of course, we're going to figure that out in later levels. Now, a couple other things I wanted to talk about real quick before we end. One is Sophia. A lot of people think she might be a spy, a Russian spy, and that she may be the lady that says Ascension at the beginning of the game. And this may be true. Maybe she's a Russian spy here in Group 935, or maybe when Maxis says that he has to send her away, he sends her away as a spy in Russia, and she just stays there after this happens because she can't come back to Group 935 anymore. It's been eaten alive. The other neat thing is the clock is stuck at 1:15, and it keeps repeating 3 seconds over and over again. Some people think this may have to do with them being stuck in a time warp. And that's a possibility we may get into in later levels when we start dealing more and more with time. Another thing is there's a place on a wall somewhere here in the level where there's initials JD, and we're going to talk more about him in Kino. And then the last thing is when you Pack-a-Punch the DG2, it becomes the DG3JZ. And the neat thing I think is that JZ in scientific annotation is asteroid, and the element 115 came from asteroids. So that about wraps it up.